Okay, so question 6 is on the second text, as we know, and it's the evaluate question, and it's our next big mark question. You will be prepared for this because you will have seen this in paper 1, so you'll have to do an evaluate question there as well. So this shouldn't be too unfamiliar, but it might be something that you aren't so sure of. But let me tell you, as teenagers, you are brilliant at this. You might feel a little bit unsure, but you are. Basically, all you're being asked to do is give your opinion. You can do that. I've heard you do that. You need to be critical and explain what works and what doesn't. This is not asking you to analyse the writer's techniques or zoom in on that word level analysis that we had to do in question 3. But comment on what they're trying to achieve. What is it the writer wants to do? What do they want you to think? And then how do they do this? I'm going to give you some insider information now and make this really, really easy to nail. There is a simple formula to remember, and once you've got this, you will find this question so easy. The trick to this question is knowing exactly what the mark scheme is looking for. Examiners are trained to look for 5 things in your response: setting, people, ideas, themes, and events. The most important here really are the setting, people, and events, as they are the most obvious things that you can look for. Think of it like this. If I told you to write a story, where would you start? It's probably not going to be with which words you might use or what techniques you could include. It's going to be with where will it be set? Who will be in it? What's actually going to happen? What big ideas or themes am I trying to get across to my reader? And this is exactly what this question is asking for you to look for. These 5 things that make up our acronym SPITE, with some evidence from the text and evaluation of how well they work. Does the writer manage to achieve what you think they've set out to? It is that simple. We're looking for what is it that these writers are doing, not at word level, but at whole text level, to convey their ideas. We can do this. We're going to start our answer to question 6 by looking at 2 of the main elements of SPITE. We're actually going to look at setting and events hand in hand. And as you can see, I've already annotated this section. We're looking at the setting, and hopefully the writers have told us that the crew is based in the Antarctic. Now that immediately brings out a sense of danger, because what we know about the Antarctic is that it's cold, it's icy, it's dangerous, it's isolated. If you were in the Antarctic and you needed help, there isn't anybody else there. So the writer's showing the importance of helping out through setting it in the Antarctic. The crew are making life and death decisions with very little help or advice anywhere close. And we need to connect that to the key event, because the key event of this article is the fact that these penguins are trapped in a gully as the storm rages around them, and they make the decision to help. So the key event is the birds being trapped in the storm in the ravine and the camera crew digging a ramp in the snow. And I've put this word pathos, which you'll remember from question 3. So the setting in the Antarctic and the event of the birds being trapped in the storm that raged around them create a sense of pathos. Remember, pathos means that we pity them. We pity. We get this sense of overwhelming sympathy. That's where the word path comes from. Okay, sympathy, empathy. Path meaning creating a sense of sadness. Okay, so we get this sense of pathos from the events and from the setting. So there's an attempt to show the importance of helping out, which is very successful because a sense of pathos is created through the setting bringing out the sense of danger, and the event of the birds being trapped, they're confined, they're stuck as the storm rages around them. So my first paragraph would very much be about the setting and the danger and the events of the storm, and that is how the writer successfully achieves the importance of helping out. The next element I'm going to look at is the people aspect of spite, because we've already done S and we've already done E. So I'm going to have a look at people, because our next paragraph opens with someone who we are mostly, I'm sure most of you will have at least heard of him, is a very important person. So we have Sir David Attenborough. Sir David Attenborough, TV legend, shall we say. And he narrates the series. And so if we're thinking about what the writer's trying to achieve, they're trying to show the importance of helping out. And in order to substantiate, in order to give evidence and validity to their article, they've drawn on an expert. So they're looking at Sir David Attenborough as the voice of reason, of someone who has credibility. He's very well respected in this world. And so by using Sir David Attenborough to say you're trained as a non-participant, that's very important, it adds weight to the argument. So I'm just going to annotate that there. So Sir David Attenborough adds weight to the argument. Remember, I dropped the E when I've got the vowel there, so it's argument, no E needed. So because we have Sir David Attenborough, even if you didn't know who he was, the fact that he's a Sir means he has a knighthood, which means he's been rewarded for, what he knows how to do. And so because we have this, go back to the question, there's an attempt to show the importance of helping out. You have a very important person here who is prepared to give his opinion, which adds weight to the argument. We then get the however, so we know that we're going to give a second opinion. We now have Mike Gunton, who is the head of the Natural History Unit. So we have immediately, after having the event and the setting established in the opening, two very important, very key people giving their opinions. So if the writer is trying to show the importance of helping out, by putting in two very well-known people, two very important people, into his article, into the argument, he's showing just how important it is. Because if it wasn't important, they wouldn't be giving their opinion. So we need to think very carefully when people are introduced into our non-fiction extracts and into something that is like this. It's very clear the significance of the situation, the importance of helping out. Because again, if it wasn't, why would they have an opinion? So my next paragraph is very much going to be about these people. This middle section, we can look more about the ideas. So the idea here is that you don't interfere. You can't interfere. You wouldn't interfere because of all sorts of consequences. So the idea is there are consequences to interfering with wildlife. So the main idea of this text is debated in the middle, because we have people, so this is Mike Gunton speaking again, and he's talking about it's one of the very few occasions that he would have interfered. It's a very unusual situation. You wouldn't normally do it. It would usually be dangerous. You might be depriving something of food. However, the idea is that sometimes there are extreme situations where you can break the rules. So the main idea of this text, which can sometimes feel a little bit complex when we're trying to really get down to that nitty-gritty, the main idea of this text is debating when is it okay to interfere? When is it okay to intervene? Because David Attenborough at the start is saying you're trained as a cameraman, you're a non-participant, you shouldn't normally intervene, you shouldn't do anything other than record. And you've got Mike Gunton, who again is saying, normally we wouldn't do this. However, The idea of this text is that there are extenuating circumstances. There are times when you should and could intervene, because actually nothing else is at harm. Further on, and towards the bottom, it talks about witnessing the cheetah mother with her cubs, who they could have intervened with and they could have made her survive, or the elephant who was dying from the drought, and again they could have given it water, but you're causing disruption. But in this sense, the idea of the text is actually there are times when intervention is the most acceptable option. My last point I'm going to make is going to be linked to the theme. And this is a really tricky one, because our themes tend to be our really big ideas. They're the kind of thing that we really have to grapple with. So if we think about Jekyll and Hyde, it's about duality. If we think about Macbeth, it's about that battle between good and evil. And so when we look at a non-fiction text, it's not often as easy to identify the theme. But if I think about the big thing that's happening in this text particularly, it's this idea of a dilemma. The dilemma that we have, so I'm just going to write that down, DILEMMA. This dilemma between should we help or shouldn't we help? To what point are we interfering with things that are none of our business? And so the final point that I would make about this, if I'm evaluating the attempt to show the importance of helping out, the point I'm going to make is the fact that the writer is very successful in showing the dilemma about helping out. Is it important to help out? Is it important to not interfere? And so the final point that I'm going to try and say is that the writer is giving many examples about different scenarios and different situations when people could have helped but didn't, or people could have helped and did. So we've got the elephant, we've got the cheetahs, and we've got the penguins. And so the importance of helping out is shown very successfully through the moral dilemma that the writer has about the decision that he makes to help the penguins. As we did with question 3, we're going to tie those points very neatly into a plan here, so that when you go away and you revise, you've got a way that you can approach this question. So remember, the most important thing is spite. Question 6 is all about spite, setting people, ideas, themes, events. That is what the mark scheme told us we're looking for. That is what the examiners are trained to spot in your answers. That is what they're looking for. That is what they want you to be writing about, because as soon as they see those keywords, you are getting ticks. So if we think about how we approach this question, the first point we made tied in those first two. We tied in setting. So we said, because we need to open with our critical evaluation, the setting was successful, because we always want to put in successful, because we want to say that we're evaluating and we're showing that attempt and we're saying the writer was successful. So the setting was successful in showing the importance, because I'm going to use the question here, of helping out, okay, through the danger and isolation. I'm just going to remind myself in my plan that it's set in the Antarctic, not Antarctica, it's set in the Antarctic. Okay, so the setting was very successful in showing of helping out through the danger and isolation, because if they didn't help, nobody else would. And the second point to that is the events contributed to that sense of pathos, so contributed to the sense of pathos, created through the setting. And I'm just going to bullet point this for speed, but obviously you can write this out. So the events contributed to the sense of pathos created through the setting because the birds were trapped. Okay, in a storm, and if no one else to help. Okay, so I've just made some notes there. So my first point, I can cross off S and I can cross off E. So that left me with people, ideas and themes. So the second point that I made was about the people who were successful. Again, I'm not going to write this out in full sentences because I want to make sure that we're getting through these answers. So the people who were successful because we had Sir David Attenborough and we had Mike Gunton, who was the head of the Natural History Unit. Okay, and they were successful, remember, because it added weight to the argument. It meant that when the writer was looking at this, he was drawing on those expert opinions to show the importance of that debate, which led us very nicely onto our third point. Oh, sorry, I'm going to cross off P to make sure. I've just crossed off my P there. My next point was about the idea, and the main idea of the text was this discussion. So the main idea was the discussion over when it was acceptable, sometimes I even have to sound it out, so when it was acceptable to help out, and this was successful. It was successful in showing the importance because it showed the thought that went into it. And then the last point, which leads very nicely on from that, after I've crossed off my idea, because I know I'm going to have written about that, is the theme. And as we discussed in the last little section, the theme is the moral dilemma. Okay, so it was the moral dilemma between when to help and when to not, and that was through the examples of the cheetah, the penguins, and the elephants. Okay, so the theme was very successful, and again, I'd make sure that my point is always leading with the writer is successful in their attempt to show the importance of helping out through presenting the moral dilemma as the theme. The writer focuses on several different examples of when it's okay to help out and when it's not, in order to convey that sense of the moral dilemma, the debate that we go through. Because there are times when we desperately want to help, such as the elephant dying in the drought and the poor little baby cheetahs really playing on our heartstrings, but them having to step back, and then them choosing to help with the penguins, and the way that decision came to through the fact that it wouldn't have affected the food chain. It would have been something that actually, it wouldn't have harmed anything to do with the very delicate ecosystem that our planet has. And so the theme of this moral dilemma is very successful in showing the importance of helping out and when not to help out. It's a tricky question, this one, but follow Spite and you will hit the mark scheme.